You don't seriously think you're going to get Americans to go communist, do you?
It sure sucks to be right all the time. 4 years ago, we made a video about the Red Scare coming back, and, well...
The future looks red, as in communist.
We have been fighting the spread of communism.
Communist dictators, that's what we're dealing with right now, Donald Trump.
You could go through her ideology. It's the ideology of a communist.
We will get more and more information about the network and how we can root them out and eliminate them from the existence of American society.
This is the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism, to dismantle Antifa.
Just look at the result of yesterday's election in New York, where their party installed a communist as the mayor.
We're in the first stages of a new Red Scare, and things are getting hotter for sure. Frog in a hot tub kind of vibes. Not exactly stewing yet, but the heat is definitely there, and the jets are hitting just right.
Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
No peoples in the world can feel secure against this aggression.
It is a matter of national survival.
The communist seizure of power.
But first, it's ad read time, because God knows we're not making any money from YouTube AdSense. Thank you, Google. Skip ahead to this timestamp if you hate me and don't want to support my work. This episode is sponsored by Aura, the only cool company on this cursed platform. Google your name real quick. Odds are some of your personal information comes up, right? If I search my name, it's just my public social media profiles. That's because Aura is my digital watchdog. If they get even a whiff of my data being sold, traded, or exposed in a breach anywhere on the internet, including the dark web, they track down the source and make sure they have a bad time. There are companies out there called data brokers whose whole purpose is to find and sell your data. They do it without your consent, and they make billions selling it to marketers, scammers, and even stalkers. They are the worst. Thanks to Aura, they're not my problem anymore. Aura forces them to remove my data, and they keep it removed. But that's just part of why I use and genuinely appreciate Aura. It's an all-in-one security tool. They provide real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 identity theft monitoring, a secure VPN, antivirus, parental controls, password manager, credit checker, and a lot more. And if somehow anything does happen, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance. And they have US-based fraud experts on call 24/7. If you're anything like me, I'm sure you're sick and tired of these stupid, evil little companies stealing your personal information and using it to make a quick buck. That's why I use Aura. It keeps me and my family safe online. If you're ready to protect your data, you can get 2 weeks absolutely free when you use my link. During those 2 weeks, you'll see exactly where your data is being leaked and who's doing it. Give it a try. I promise you'll appreciate the peace of mind. And now, back to the show.
We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty.
Okay, so Red Scares. I won't lie to you, these things are usually pretty easy to spot. Red Scares are periods, historically speaking, during which civil liberties are attacked in the name of defending America from domestic movements for justice and equality.
How does communism exist if it is so intolerable to the people it rules?
It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life.
They take over organization after organization in America in just 2 steps: infiltration and agitation.
I don't think you have any conception of the danger of the Communist Party.
To some extent, there's always some of that going on. But in moments where you have an unpopular war, economic problems at home, and visible racialized violence coming together, like we do today, that's when the communist label starts being thrown around and becomes much more toxic.
Communist?
Communist.
He's a straight-up communist.
And the effects of that can be devastating. Just a few months ago, we saw one of the clearest signals that things are escalating when Trump signed the National Security Presidential Memorandum No. 7, also known as the NSPM 7. This is not a normal executive order. It's not an executive order at all. I know, it's become way too easy to tune those out with the over 200 Trump has already signed, but NSPMs are actually an entirely different kind of document. Unlike executive orders, which cover general federal day-to-day operations, NSPMs are specifically for the defense, foreign policy, intelligence, and law enforcement apparatus. so cops. And in this NSPM, the 7th ever, all those sectors are tasked with a new project. Quote, disrupting groups, organizations, and even individuals who display any of the following things that the NSPM calls indicators of violence: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, extremism on gender, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, to name just a few.
These are anarchists and agitators, professional anarchists and agitators, and they get hired by wealthy people.
As far as Red Scares go, this one is really on the nose. This NSPM makes holding any of these views, which it doesn't bother to carefully define, a sort of pre-crime that just about anyone to the left of the MAGA crowd could reasonably be accused of. And it gives the DOJ the authority to investigate people who hold these views without any of this having to be approved by Congress. Which is useful because some in Congress have already caught on to what's going on here.
It certainly appears like it's a strategy to take folks you disagree with and label them a terrorist threat when there may be absolutely no such threat at all.
The NSPM 7 is a concerning development, but in all honesty, we've already seen what this sort of crackdown looks like before it was even signed. Remember the anti-ICE protest in LA last summer?
Our continuing coverage of the fast-moving developments in Los Angeles. Today, protesters were back out on the streets for the third consecutive day. President Trump deployed some 2,000 National Guard members in response to violence and chaos in the city.
In June, the SSCC put 3 organizations, quote, on notice for what it calls supporting coordinated protests and riots, lawless mob actions, and aiding and abetting criminal conduct. Now, that kind of warning is concerning enough on its own. But in this same letter, these 3 groups were also told they now have to keep all communications and contractual, financial, travel, and strategy information related to their role in, quote, planning, coordinating, or funding the protests, or face possible criminal investigation. And while on paper, this means that if there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear, the reality is that this is a pretty common intimidation tactic that's been used in the last 2 Red Scares of the 20s and 50s to shut down progressive orgs. Without needing to take anyone to trial, warnings like these create fear, and that fear drives down membership. Abiding by these demands and surrendering all this data also takes work, and therefore resources, away from organizing and recruiting, which also hurts membership. This kind of scrutiny also opens the door to facing all sorts of penalties for non-compliance, which are bad enough already, but they can also implicate people outside the immediate organization who become guilty by association. Effectively, this is a low-effort way for the state to hurt progressive organizations and their communities without anybody needing to be formally tried for any crime. The accusation is destructive enough. To give you an idea, this very kind of thing shut down groups like the CAA back in the 50s, when 18 years of pressure just became too much. And let's actually stay on the 50s for a second, because there's a lot to learn about how Red Scares work back then.
Chairman J. Parnell Thomas of New Jersey opens an inquiry into possible communist penetration of the Hollywood film industry.
I don't believe it's a political party. I believe it's an un-American thing. And I feel that they really ought to be smoked out.
When you hear about the second Red Scare, if that's something that happens to you, it's usually through the prism of what happened in Hollywood.
These are the Hollywood 10. In the fall of 1947, they were subpoenaed to appear before the House Committee on Un-American Activities. They were tried and declared guilty. They appealed their cases to the higher courts, and their appeal was denied. All 10 are now in federal prison, serving 1-year sentences.
The big thing people know about the 50s Red Scare is blacklists. Naming names. Lists of over 900 people suspected of being communists and thereby ostracized from having any place in Hollywood.
The 6 or 7 major studios early in December of 1947 made this announcement that 10 persons who had refused to divulge before the committee their political affiliation would no longer be employed in the Hollywood motion picture industry.
Writers had to go underground. Oscar-winning actors weren't hired for decades. Studios abandoned their directors. During the height of McCarthyism, suspicion of communist ties was enough to ruin lives and careers.
I think it was probably a very necessary thing at the time, because the radical liberals were going to take over our business.
And had it only been that, the Red Scare would have already been a massive attack on freedom and free speech. But the second Red Scare was much more than blacklists. Quote, by official counting, 2 people were executed by the state, several hundred academics were fired, several thousand went to prison or were deported, and several tens of thousands lost their jobs as state or federal workers. The FBI spied on Americans in the civil rights movement. The Supreme Court upheld the convictions of those who refused to name names. Cities like Chicago barred suspected communists from public housing. And New York even denied fishing licenses to those who wouldn't swear an anti-communist loyalty oath. Wouldn't even give them the benefit of the trout. Now, on the organization side of things, groups like CPUSA, CAA, and the CRC were banned and or lost tens of thousands of members. We're talking about a huge chill across all of civil society. And not just in socialist groups that were officially targeted, as you might expect, but almost everywhere on the left. And I'll let you in on a secret. That was the point. While on their face, Red Scares designate communism as the enemy, communism is a flexible enough word to include anything vaguely progressive the government wants to target.
They are lying, dirty, shrewd, godless, murderous, determined, and it is not an American political party like any other.
During the 50s, that meant things like targeting black activists pushing for equal human rights, especially aggressively, and seriously undermining progressive programs like the New Deal. Now, the New Deal was not a communist project, just to be clear. But under McCarthyism, fear of Reds became the justification for a total assault on workers' rights that the New Deal had improved. For example, one way the New Deal was sabotaged was with the Taft-Hartley Act. Taft-Hartley curbed the right to strike and boycott and made unions much, much weaker as a result. And Taft-Hartley was far from the only strategy used to achieve that. A big part of the Red Scare was also the thousands of state and federal workers being purged from the government. Black, Jewish, and queer workers were disproportionately targeted and accused of innate communist sympathies and fired en masse, thereby gutting the government of its more social and regulatory powers in the process. And to that end, this scare looks a lot like the last one.
We are now in day 31 of the government shutdown, and many SNAP recipients will not receive benefits tomorrow on the 1st of the month.
As of writing this, 40 million people just went without SNAP benefits for weeks as Trump blamed the shutdown on Democrats and labeled them part of the, quote, radical left. Last year, Doge tore through hundreds of thousands of federal jobs led by a billionaire whose life mission is being anti-woke. And you probably missed this, but last January, the chair of the NLRB, the part of the government in charge of enforcing labor law and protecting workers from unfair labor practices, was fired, meaning the NLRB is now, quote, toothless, according to another fired NLRB official. And we're well on the way to the National Labor Relations Act being repealed entirely. This could potentially mean no more federal right to collective bargaining or worker organizing at all. And if there's some stir around the words communist and Antifa today, woke seems to be the preferred wedge for forcing these tactics through these last few years. Communism is bad, always, but woke is scary now. So now everything is woke, from universal healthcare to drag, and under this label, anything and everything becomes a very real threat to Americanism. See, real Americans don't watch drag shows, or afford life-saving procedures, or protest. That's lib-woke commie shit. Real Americans shut up and take it. And take it, some people are. Just like in previous Red Scares, we're seeing private institutions willingly running away from woke like their predecessors ran away from red. If the last Red Scare relied on Hollywood to self-police, today law firms, universities, major brands, and hospitals have all already shown themselves to be ready to bend the knee. They've rejected any association with wokeness, and in the process, have happily helped this Red Scare along without even being forced. And the effects of that can be dramatic. For past Red Scares, all the infiltration, intimidation, and general destruction of civil society poisoned the well on progressive politics for years. At the end of World War II, the progressive movement was rich and interconnected. Membership in groups like CPUSA peaked. Anti-fascism was anti-capitalism, was anti-racism, was anti-imperialism, was anti-war. There was a clear and popular sense that to fight for one cause was to fight for them all. In the same way that today's No Kings protest opposed gross abuses of government power and horrifying kidnappings by immigration officials and wealth accumulation by billionaires, even if they do so vaguely, so too did the pre-Red Scare progressive movement unite all those who couldn't accept injustice in all its forms. But the Red Scare wiped out that solidarity. Being associated with anyone on the left was just too risky. So the fight for democratic socialism and human rights was quickly watered down into a more palatable protest for holding on to liberalism as the government was gutted and incrementally extending civil rights to more groups. It took years, until the late 60s, for the spirit of intersectional struggle to come back. Even though he's now associated almost exclusively with the fight for civil rights, MLK is a good example of this. He said things like, quote, "We must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. You can't really get rid of one without getting rid of the others." He believed that capitalism had, quote, "outlived its usefulness," and most famously of all said, quote, "Call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, but there must be a better distribution of wealth within this country for all God's children." But between the 50s and the 60s, too much organizational power was lost, and these beliefs and their associated demands just became too ambitious. Within months of launching the Poor People's Campaign, a new movement that brought all these struggles together again, King was assassinated, and the rest of the Cold War years successfully buried his mission.
The problem of racism, the problem of economic exploitation, and the problem of war are all tied together. These are the triple evils that are interrelated. What I'm saying today is that we must go from this convention and say, America, you must be born again.
What I'm trying to say here is that Red Scares aren't just mass moral panics like you might typically think. They are concerted efforts to force progressives back to the center with fear. The message coming from the very top is moderate, accept that you have no power, and you might be spared. The good thing is that we're seeing people rejecting this deal everywhere. The biggest city in the country just elected a socialist. Running to the center lost the Democrats the presidential election. Membership in left-wing orgs is reaching new highs. Protests have never had as many attendees. Everywhere you look, yes, you see intimidation and recycled tactics, but you also see courage and community and resistance. People are still organizing, still fighting for justice, still demanding equality, and getting results. Think of it this way. They wouldn't bother scaring people that they're not scared of themselves.